I hate big cities. I don't think there is anything in this world that could make me like big cities. On top of just
Well, I
being
tend to
terrible
agree with you
places,
on that.
they're stock full of the worst scum humanity has to offer.
And that's why the Democrats are mad at Trump right now. Welcome to the Trumpet of the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I am Joshua Farrar, the least qualified to be here.
But you're here nonetheless.
According to the experts, it doesn't require to be an expert to be a pundit on the internet.
You don't have to be an expert to be an expert. You just have to be an expert.
An expert at being an expert, huh?
Uh-huh.
What circular logic is that?
It's what the Democrats thrive on. Circular logic. Like, I'm right because I say so.
Or in the case of the college systems, I'm right because this piece of paper says so. Well, what gives that piece of paper the right to say so? That guy over there. What gives that guy the right to say so? Well, that guy over there. And it just goes farther and farther down the line, and eventually you just don't even know who they're talking about anymore.
That's true.
Until you stop knowing who they're talking about by the second guy.
Usually, yeah. I mean, I think the whole thing is a scam. I don't trust enough of them to qualify anyone, especially looking at results.
Well, being a that we are currently in a society that is pushing higher education so they can indoctrinate and brainwash people into causing riots in Portland and Washington and New York and Georgia and every other big city they can come across. I would say that higher education is not proving itself to be all that it's cracked up to be.
Yeah. Is there a statistic on the amount of people that go in college normal and come out as communists? There's got to be a statistic for that somewhere, right?
I think they might be still gathering that. It's been happening
I'm
since
sure
at least
there's
the
somebody
50s.
has done the math.
It's been happening since at least the 50s, but they're only now getting people aware of it.
Well, when I took and went to Bible college, I can tell you what the statistics were for people going into Bible college as a Christian and coming out an atheist.
80%?
It was 65%.
Oh, man.
65.
That's lower than I thought.
Pretty sure it's higher.
That's good news. That was lower than I thought.
But, well, I can take and personally name two communists that went in semi-normal into college and here locally and came out as communists.
Yeah.
So I know that our local college it takes and corrupts the minds of the innocent to pollute them and make them future or comrades of the Communist Party, good Democrat slaves.
Which, if Mao Zedong is anything to talk about, they'll be the first of the chopping block. Them and anyone who happens to wear glasses.
That's Pol Pot.
Yeah, that was Pol Pot.
Mao Zedong did.
That was Pol Pot.
Mao Zedong did something similar to the college kids, though.
No, he would have culled them for sure, because he doesn't... Well, it depends. If they were good loyalists, then maybe not. But if they started to move their way up the ladder,
Mao Zedong only took and put college students into concentration camps if they dared speak out against him and his government.
So a great deal of them.
Yes, a great deal of them, but not all of them. Pol Pot killed everybody that was educated and wore glasses.
Remember, he was so bloodthirsty that even the communists deposed him.
I guess he just didn't pass the poll.
These rioters that all the news is portraying as these peaceful protesters are good, brainless zombies.
Do they even know what they're rioting about, or are they just rioting for the sake of rioting?
Most of them.
Most of them are just being used as shields for the rioters. As the front
I'm talking about the rioters themselves, not the protesters.
Oh, okay.
Not the ones being used as shields.
I would say it depends on the individual. Some know what they're about, some just want free stuff, and some want to throw a tantrum.
I would say the majority of them know exactly why they're doing it. They're doing it for that paycheck that Black Lives Matter and George Soros writes them every week to a month.
But do they know what Black Lives Matter stands for?
They don't care. It really comes down to the basics that most of them could care less about the cause. There are some that care about the cause. They're mostly the protesters.
Yeah.
But
even most of
the ones that are beating people to death.
Even most of the protesters don't know what Black Lives Matter really stands for.
Well, the Black Lives Matter.
Oh, that's true.
The Black Lives Matter organization is very intentionally trying to delude them into thinking they're about something other than what they are.
Well, what they're about is black supremacy.
No, they're about white supremacy, which is arguably even worse. It's one thing.
Black Lives.
It would be one thing if they were trying to delude these people into at least enabling ends that would be beneficial to them. But no, they're actively trying to undercut the very people they claim to be supporting, which is worse.
Well, they're communists.
Yeah.
Publicly stated.
And as good Marxists, they adopt a burn it down system. If they can't get their way, they're going to burn the whole thing down.
Which is why we find that President Trump's having to send out federal officers to protect federal buildings.
Despite the pushback of certain individual states.
Or rather, the governors and mayors of certain individual states.
Yeah.
But they can't really do anything about it. They're federal officers, and they are fulfilling the law.
The Supreme Court specifically said they couldn't do anything about it when they tried. In fact, I believe the governor of Oregon claimed that if the federal officers came, they would arrest them. And
I think in Oregon it's a she.
Okay.
Of course, anymore you never know. She might be an it.
Pronouns.
How dare you! How dare you assume their gender?
Oh, like I said, in this day and age, she may be an it.
Very well, maybe.
Especially over in the left coast.
The left coast? Not the west coast?
Yes.
So if you look at a map,
I'm aware.
The right coast and the left.
I'm aware of where he got it from. Just find it an amusing way to describe it. Of course, I was having a discussion the other day where a guy was telling me that Chicago and by extension all of Illinois should not be considered part of the Midwest. It should in fact be considered part of the Middle East because it is on the middle but eastern side of the country if you were to split it perfectly in half down the center. I said
Oh,
nay.
I agree. They should be part.
I said nay. It should not be called part of the Middle East. It should be called the Middle North.
I agree with him. It should be sent to the Middle East.
I know a lot of people from Illinois who would rather not be sent to the Middle East.
The entire contents of certain naval bases notwithstanding.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, the president's trying to bring people
Just
out of the Middle East. Not send them back in.
Just pack up Chicago and send them to the Middle East. After all, that's where they're supposed to be.
Oh my. It makes
Of course,
me
you know
think
why.
Of that, it makes me think of that Night Chicago Died song too. On the east side of Chicago.
Yeah, and the east side of Chicago, which does not exist, they're out in the lake.
Sure, it exists. It's just very, very on the coast of the lake.
Downtown.
They're just gunning people down on the lake.
Downtown.
Downtown.
Say about it. You know why they took and classified everything west of Ohio
St. Louis.
as the Midwest.
St. Louis.
Yep, the Lewis and Clark Party. No, it's everything. It starts in Ohio, not that far over.
Yeah, but St. Louis has the whole gateway to the west
frontier
thing.
used to be.
There's that whole gateway.
Yeah,
to
that's
the
going
west
into the
thing.
west. The Midwest is.
Midwest is still the west.
It's still considered a different region.
But Kentucky, Ohio, and that region was considered the West during the colonial periods.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Because the French and Indian War, that's what they won from the French. And it.
Right, and so,
now personally,
so that
I always argue that you can't use east and
the Midwest.
I always argue that you can't actually use east and west as definitive points of description. You can say you're going east and you can say you're going west, but considering it is a round globe and east and west are not affected by the magnetic poles of the Earth, unlike north and south, they don't have a definitive point. So although you can say it's east of one thing or west of the other thing, you can really only use north and south to verify exactly where it is along the compass.
That's why I choose to take in different. That's why I choose to refer to them as the left coast.
Most of them should just get left behind. Although
Sadly,
the other coast doesn't seem all right either.
The majority of people in those states don't live in an area controlled by the liberals. But the liberals control the state.
Yeah. Same with New York. Same with Chicago, actually.
Yeah.
Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got these where the most of the country doesn't agree with them. But these big population centers dictate what happens in the whole state.
When they've got no idea what goes on outside their little city. Their little bubble.
And they seem to be totally brain dead about the whole situation anyway. You're attacking police officers and then shocked and horrified when the police officers take and arrest them. Yeah. You're really gonna lock me up? You can't do this to a good Wisconsin girl. That's a direct quote, by the way.
I know. Should have stayed in Wisconsin.
What I was wondering is what she was doing in Portland rioting.
Yeah, that's a long ways from Wisconsin.
It's because it's not her own city. She can riot in other people's city. It's no skin off her back. But if she starts rioting in her own, then her own little Starbucks gets destroyed. She can't have her mocha frappuccino lattes.
Well, what I want to know is, okay, so if all of the liberal cities get burned, how does that affect the voting pattern in the states? If they're killing people who would vote for the other party, for the party that they support anyways, then you're just shifting the vote even further skewed to the other side.
Well, calling back to much older news, like from a couple months ago, the population of New York is tanking. Anyone who has the money to leave is leaving.
Same with California.
Almost the entirety of the rich have already abandoned New York. And they were the only ones keeping the place afloat. Figuratively, not literally, because islands don't float, regardless of how some people seem to think.
Well, some islands actually do float, but
they're not technically islands, they're rafts.
Yeah, they're technically rafts. But unlike like the one guy in the House of Representatives that thought Guam was floating.
My. Please tell me he wasn't a Republican.
They elect some real winners.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't. He was a Democrat.
Ah.
He wanted to know how expanding the Navy base on Guam wouldn't make it top heavy and make it roll over and sink.
Because that's not how physics works. What year was
and
this?
The admiral with a. This was back in the 90s. The admiral with a straight face, mind you, didn't crack a smile, looked at him straight in the eye and said, "Islands touch the ground." That response tells me a couple of unfortunate truths. One, it tells me that he's had to use that explanation or something like it to his superiors very often. And two, it tells me that he has gotten used to this truth and is no longer mortified by it. Yes. Oh. But it's like these guys taking say, "Oh well, we're going to arrest the police if they come to our city or state. How dare they enforce the law here?" Well, let's just let it burn. Burn, baby, burn.
You know, I think a lot of this could have been resolved if the people living in these cities just stopped voting for provenly bad Democrat ideas. But no, they always vote the same way for change, because that makes sense. What was the definition of insanity again?
We're having a coin shortage.
The same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, actually, I heard a good explanation for why we have a coin shortage. They shut the mints down because of COVID.
How is anyone supposed to get their breath mints now?
You lose it.
They lost their change. All because
Change,
all just come to
believe
all
it.
because of the Chinese virus. The only change you can believe it here.
Oh man, I wonder how many people bothered remembering that election slogan.
It was huge back then. Huge.
Well, I'm sure that Biden's trying to revamp it right now.
He doesn't even seem to be trying.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with the opinion that they're trying to get Biden in just so they can replace him under the can't rule because he's not mentally sound statute, so they can slide in their VP candidate as the real president.
But you notice though how they seem to want to kind of sweep his Obama connections under the rug for the most part. They haven't resurrected the old slogan.
At times. At times, and then at other times they emphasize it.
Yeah, whichever happens to be convenient to their narrative at that moment. Now,
But they
thinking about it, it's kind of like they're trying to reverse the whole Teddy Roosevelt thing. And for people listening who don't know about this, if there happens to be anyone listening, but anyway, for those listening, Teddy Roosevelt was given the vice candidate seat. Well, no, the vice president seat. Sorry, in order to prevent him from dividing the party. So they nominated him as vice president so that he wouldn't run for president and take it away from the party. And then his predecessor, Lyndon Johnson, I want to say, died. And who was his predecessor?
No. For Roosevelt?
Lyndon Johnson was
Johnson was in the 60s.
Lyndon Johnson was 60s.
But then who was his predecessor? I forget. I wanted to say Lyndon Johnson, but it's
Roosevelt. There was Taft. There was, I think, Hayes. No, Hayes was earlier than that.
It may have been Taft.
There were three main people duking it out for presidency when Roosevelt.
Either way, the one who actually made president that time around ended up dying, at which immediately put Teddy Roosevelt, the one they didn't want, as president. And he ended up winning a second term after that.
That's not how Teddy Roosevelt got it. That's how Coolidge got it.
I'm pretty sure it was Teddy Roosevelt.
No, Roosevelt got it through election each time. Coolidge got it his predecessor died, and then he won the re-election.
Teddy Roosevelt.
And now the internet.
Oh yeah, I am definitely Googling this. Sickly child.
Theodore Roosevelt.
Processing. Please wait.
Let's see. Out of duty, he did not contest on his own nomination. Let's see. Roosevelt fought hard and succeeded in influencing the Manhattan delegates that stated to take control of the state convention, bargaining through the night and outmaneuvering the supporters of Arthur and James G. Blaine, and national reputation as a key person in New York State.
McKinley accepted him as vice president when his vice president died. Garrett Hobart. That's how he became vice president. He was later beaten by Taft.
Who only had one term, by the way.
Let's see.
Mm-hmm. Which is highly unusual. Normally, if a person takes and gets elected once and runs for a second term, they get the second term.
Normally, but not with Taft. At the time, though, Roosevelt was also trying to get his third term.
Yeah, and he pulled out the Bull Moose Party, which took and
Divided
messed
the
everything
vote.
up.
Yeah. Progressive Party.
Divided the vote.
Which all of them progressives at that time. Every single one. Republican or Democrat. Didn't matter. They all wanted the same thing.
Yeah. Well, the rhinos and the Democrats are the same anyway, so how's it changed much?
Well, the Republican establishment and the Democrats. It's just that you have the rogue arm of the Republicans that is currently in control.
Well, that was the case during Reagan too. The rogue arm was controlling the things. The one that the establishment wanted was Bush.
Yeah. And we also had that turn. Well, okay, I say we all. I'm actually too young for that. But you saw how that turned out.
Yeah, and that's when the Libertarian Party split the vote. With Perot. That's why they've been trying to get another Republican to run against Trump now, as a third party to take and split the vote.
It's too late now. They can't even get on the ballot in most states.
True. But when they could, they were pushing for it.
Well, it never happened.
Josh looks like he's deep in thought and reading.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da.
When we take and we think about the manipulations of politicians and the manipulations of people, propaganda seems to be the favorite method in which they use in order to control the society. And we, in our modern day and age, they're trying to shut everybody up if they disagree with them or have any information they don't want
Twitter.
brought out. Twitter's a good example, yes. Twitter, Facebook, even YouTube will take and censor people for taking and going through and leaving the party line.
Don't forget Google.
Google is bad about it. They had Google in front of the Congress today, confronting them about their aiding the Chinese army in improving their weapon system, but refusing to help the U.S. military.
Which
sounds like an enemy within.
Yeah, it really does, because we are not on good terms with China right now. But each of those organizations that we mentioned have been facing, have been in front of Congress these past few days. Every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
every single one of them has been taking and dancing around the subject.
Yeah, but the main subject that's coming up is censorship. Yes, Google's a little deeper, and they're in real deep. But one of the main subjects for every one of them, including Google, is their rampant censorship of conservative voices.
Now, I didn't realize that the current CEO of Google is actually a foreigner. They're not an American.
But it's still an American company.
I don't know what country. It's an American company, but they've taken and placed somebody who's not an American as the head of the company. I don't know where they're from, but their accent was thick enough to cut. But Google aided and abetted the Chinese in silencing and censoring the internet.
And they received a lot of backlash
Google,
for what they were doing in China with
Mhm.
the internet.
and you take a Facebook, their employees have come straight out and admitted that if it's false but anti-Trump, they'll let it stand and they won't censor it. But if it's true and pro-Trump, they'll remove anything that's pro-Trump. They'll take and remove.
Well, that wasn't actually Facebook employees. That was a third-party company hired by Facebook. But it's highly unlikely that Zuckerberg wouldn't have found out about what was going on.
Very unlikely. And think about a third party employed by Facebook. They're Facebook employees.
Yeah.
They can say third party all they want, but if they're receiving a paycheck from Facebook, they're a Facebook employee.
Well, that's not entirely true, because then you'd have to view every contracting service as being the employee of the various different groups they're contracting out to.
They are. Subcontractors work for the contractor.
I was talking about the contractors themselves. Would be employees of the people they have a contract with.
When I was working security at the Department of Transportation, that security office, while it was subcontracted and was an independent company, answered to the rules established by the Department of Transportation. So the Department of Transportation was the boss. We worked for them, even though we were not direct employees. We were an employee of an employee, so to speak.
Yeah.
So Facebook sets the rules that these third parties are supposed to be following.
Yeah.
So if they are allowing this third party to take and do what they're doing, it falls back to Facebook nonetheless.
Yeah.
They're ultimately responsible.
And ultimately, they are.
And it's kind of like
ultimately, they're in violation of
Go ahead.
Forget which act, what it's called, but essentially, they have all of these companies have forfeited their right to claim themselves as a public forum because they're practicing censorship, and so their protections are their legal protections are gone. They're open to a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
It's only a matter of time until somebody brings it up against them.
They have been sued many times, and they're still being sued. Patreon is looking at losing their company because of their censorship.
All right, so it was William McKinley, by the way. McKinley was president while Theodore Roosevelt was his vice president, and he died of an assassination and was replaced by Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay.
I heard that they elected him because they didn't want him overrunning the party. They wanted him to sort of become obscure, because at the time, no one who had been vice president in the actual party system had ever become president afterward, unless through assassination. So they wanted to suppress it.
I see. And okay.
Yes.
So similar case to Coolidge.
Yes.
Now, to get back to the subject at hand of the censorship, we've got...
Especially considering we're
Twitter
probably going to edit that entire section out. Depending on what you guys are talking about and how the video feed comes through when I'm reviewing it later.
You were blanked out there. You should have heard everything we said.
Should we just restart this segment then?
I mean, it depends on what we talk on. If I do a clever cut beforehand, then I can just sort of remove that whole section. If not, I don't think the audience would care too much if I'm staring intensely at the screen while you guys are talking about something, if it's relatively important. I'm not exactly the one they're coming for, after all. I'm just the editor.
Oh, I disagree highly.
You're the number. You talk
You
more than
you
me.
have
What was that?
you've got the humor base.
I said you talk more than any of the rest of us.
You
so-
you have
Just because I seem to like the sound of my own voice does not make me the draw. In fact,
but humor does.
We could run a poll and see who exactly is the draw, but with a, 5 views of our last video, I don't really think that we've got a large enough base to poll.
You're very correct on that last part. We don't have enough base. The when we take and we look at censorship, and censorship is getting to be a real problem in this country.
Mm-hmm.
They're going before the Congress and being confronted with that. We have them censoring in the mainstream media anything that would take, and even if it's true, they'll take and censor it to keep from making the opposing political party look good. They take and are shutting down doctors and professionals because they disagree with what they're trying to push. Recently, Twitter took and banned Trump and Donald Jr. for 12 hours because they reposted a news feed that they didn't want the people to know about.
Mm-hmm.
And they pulled that news feed down from Facebook and YouTube. When the doctors in California took and came out and were explaining what they were seeing in their particular hospitals, they got pulled down because it wasn't what the news media wanted people to believe. So they got pulled down from Twitter, and they got pulled down from Facebook, and they got pulled down from YouTube. That Google's banned them. The same is true with these doctors in DC that came out recently and were telling what was working in their hospitals, but what they were working was what the news media was saying couldn't work, and therefore they had to take and throw in a ban. Now, I grant you that they were very specific about how it had to be used in order to work. They had to take 3 different drugs at the same time in order to have any kind of effect on
At the proper dosage,
the
too.
treatment, and those particular drugs enabled their own immune system to beat the virus. And they're screaming, "Oh, but there is no cure for the virus. Therefore, this is fake news." They never said it was a cure.
They said it was a treatment.
It's just a treatment. Yes, that's what it was. It was a treatment. They didn't claim it was a cure. But because this treatment has 100% success rate when done with these drugs, they wanted to take and shut them up.
Well, they're like, we can't politicize.
Because they want to keep the country shut down.
Well, they're like, we can't politicize masks. People's lives are at stake. But wait a second. Would we actually have an open discussion about a possible treatment? And they're like, no, you can't talk about that.
See, they still want the masks so they can mask their intentions.
It's all a masquerade.
Well, recent, and I'm going to state here, I do not know how true or false this next statement I'm fixing to make is. I'm clarifying that it is out there I don't know that whether it's true or not. Okay. There is a statement that people are being hospitalized from a fungal infection from wearing masks. I've heard
That doesn't surprise me,
other
actually.
comments, other sources that say. I've heard sources that says that's incorrect, but the stating of it automatically gets you banned.
Well, there are tons
So-
of.
So
That's why I was so.
a callback to some really, really old news for, moderately old news. It's like a year or two old now. But there was a scandal with a particular games company that shipped out decorational masks that was related to one of their intellectual properties. And they had to recall a large portion of these because if they were ever worn once, a lot of them ended up having strange fungus growing inside the mask that had no way to be cleaned out properly. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that in the States that overwearing and overusage of this mask without washing, mind you, because let's be honest, people are gross, especially people that don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
but
It doesn't
it's
surprise
just-
me at
And
all
see, that may
some
be the
people
reason.
would be getting fungal infection.
But it's just blatant hypocrisy on their part. They can push their point of view because lives are at stake, but we can't discuss our point of view because it's somehow dangerous as well when they're also trying to save lives. I mean, both
The
sides.
advantage of having a low audience size is we're relatively protected from being censored.
It's true. It's true, but
Actually, according to Tim Pool, we're not. He said that it's the people with the low audiences they're aiming at.
only if they you got to be in that sweet spot. You have to have a large enough audience for them to actually know what you're talking about, but a small enough audience that no one cares if you go away.
But the point is, lives are at stake.
Yeah.
Lives are at stake either way. Why can't they just shut up and listen for once?
Because it doesn't accelerate their agenda.
Agendas are everything. I had a leftist just recently take and refuse to read an article that was about common sense.
Yes, a very
Because
specific
that
leftist, if I recall correctly.
Yes, but it didn't say what he wanted to hear. Therefore, he wouldn't read it. It's fake news. Well, I read the article. The article didn't. It took and used simple common sense. It didn't go through and state facts as an expert. It simply stated A plus B equals C. This is logic. And
but does A plus B
that's
equal
considered
C?
fake news
Because
now?
I was always under the impression that A squared plus B squared equals C squared, which means that A plus B cannot equal C. That's simple algebra. Oh man, I wonder how many people are
well,
actually
A
going
plus
to get
B
that
equals
joke.
C is simple algebra too.
That's the whole point. If A squared plus B squared equals C squared, then A plus B equals C is logically the conclusion.
Yeah, A plus B cannot equal C if A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
And why is that?
That's true.
Because
Because
math. It's simple math. Because you've got the square root of A squared, which is A, plus the square root of B squared, which is B, cannot
equals-
equal the square root of C squared.
Why is that?
Because when it's added together, it becomes functionally incapable. It's not A plus B equals C. It's A squared plus B squared equals C squared. If I was to give a concrete example, mind you, and I'm probably going to edit this whole thing out anyway, but I can
Sure enough, you're
give
right.
a definite.
You're right.
Yeah,
It doesn't work.
it can't happen.
yeah.
let's say, okay, 36 plus 4 equals
40.
40. Yeah, I don't know why why I hesitated there, but it equals 40. But you take the square root of 36 and the square root of 4, it does not equal the square root of 40.
I wonder why that is.
I mean, it's quite simple, actually. But you kind of gotta, unless you sort of dissect it down to every individual example, you have to realize that math is a series of repeating patterns. And specifically trigonometry, especially trigonometry. And a squared plus b squared equals c squared is the core basis of what trigonometry is built off of. That and sine waves, but that is a whole nother argument. But because specifically in regards to triangles and circles, certain ratios will always have the same effect regardless of how large that ratio gets. And it is the basis of that math that makes trigonometry work. If you have a right angle and you have certain lengths of lines, your hypotenuse distance is set. It is guaranteed. It's why trigonometry works.
That's why you can tell where you are with a sextant.
It's why you can tell where you are with a sextant. It's why you can, well, specifically a sextant is designed to know the distance of an object with a known height, which is also trigonometry. It's why that works. It's how GPS works, because it triangulates your positions using two satellites of a known position and your distance relative to them. It's all just set patterns recurring. So yeah, you could go into the minutia of why all of it works by breaking down every single example in existence, but that's inefficient. It all just comes down to pattern recognition.
Right, but when you come down to pattern recognition, you can take and apply the same thing to other things in life as well.
Yeah.
We take and have of people who, back in the French Revolution, stated that everybody should be equal. Oh, those that disagree should have their businesses destroyed and should lose their rights. Okay, then it turned, and what did that lead to? It led to to millions of deaths. Then we take and we see the same thing rise up with the Bolshevik Revolution. Exact same thing. And it led to millions of deaths.
Same thing
we
happened
saw
in
the same
Germany.
thing in the Chinese Communist.
We saw the same thing in Germany with the Fascist Party.
Same thing happened in Germany.
Similar thing happened in Italy with their Fascist Party.
Well, the Nazi Party.
Nazis were
the Nazi
socialists
Party
and
in Germany, the Fascist Party in
in Italy.
Yeah, Nazis
both of which are socialists. Fascists are socialists too. Their whole thing is they're stronger bound together. It's socialism.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happened in China.
And
same
that
thing
was
happened
the
in
key
Vietnam.
when
Same
the
thing happened in North
socialists
Korea.
And in Spain, that image of the fists like this that Antifa's using and Black Lives Matter is using, that comes from the Spanish communist and socialist parties. They are stronger together, and that's what that fist stands for.
Yeah.
It's a and the Black Panthers adopted it because they held the same belief system. It never works. You take the pattern and lay it out. The pattern fails every time.
And at some point, you just have to realize it's not going to work. Stop trying to make it work. Fetch will never be a thing. Now, kudos to whoever gets that reference.
Now you take Venezuela, Cuba. They tried it as well. They're starving to death.
Cambodia.
Millions have died. Cambodia.
Quarter of the population of Cambodia was wiped out by Pol Pot.
Yeah, a quarter of the population wiped out. Why? Because the very basis, the premise for everything they're working on doesn't work.
I'm always amused
And it leads
by
to
that.
tyranny.
I'm always amused by that political cartoon of a guy with a giant fork sticking it into, trying to stick it into an outlet labeled communism. And the guy off to the side is, every time someone's tried that, they got hurt, right? And of course, the response by the guy holding the fork is, well, they just weren't doing it right.
But it's accurate.
It's very accurate. And thing about it is that it's a policy that is based on insanity. It takes a very core principle. For communism to work, man has to be innately good.
Well, I think that for most people,
man is not innately good.
Most people don't see it that way, believe it or not. And this may sound a little weird until I get to my point. Bear with me. Most people don't care about the whole utopian-esque aspect of it. Most people are coming at it from a point of greed. I think this is the right thing to be done, but I don't think I should be the one paying the price for it. You should be.
That's very true. That's very true.
It's greed.
Mm-hmm. Well, Churchill stated that communism was an ethos of greed.
Yeah. And he was right.
So if the Communist Party is an ethos of greed, which we can take and definitely accept,
it means we need to find the logos and pathos of greed too and finish the entire story.
Actually, in order for it to be an ethos of greed, they had to construct a logos of greed just to back it up. Problem is it falls through because it's not logical.
Now, I grant you, I don't think he used the term ethos. I did that. Yeah. But
and I mean,
I couldn't remember his exact word.
They
to be
run
a well-written essay, you need the logos, pathos, and ethos of greed.
But they run almost exclusively on pathos, so you don't have to worry about that because.
Yeah, because they're totally pathological.
You have the trifecta right there.
Uh-huh. And we're sitting there spitting out Greek.
It's all Greek to me.
But the very notion that all these concepts are based on is insane. You take and do the same thing over and over and over and again, and every time it fails, and we'll try it again. It'll work this time. That's madness.
My.
It's almost as bad as the extreme libertarians who are saying, well, if we take the government out of everything and we hand everything over to the corporations, everything's going to be great because the corporations will do what's best for us.
Mercantilism.
No. No.
I'm just glad that commercialism is dying, to be honest. Commercialism had its decades in the sun, and now it's dying. Good riddance.
If you look at all these companies, all the major big corporations are bowing the knee to terrorists and thugs. How do you take and operate any kind of a functional system run by terrorists and thugs?
Well, their whole Splinter Cell organization kind of worked. The Mafia was pretty good
In
at
what
it
way?
too. Oh, it was a perfect
That's
example of an organization run by terrorists and thugs.
but look how many people died from it.
Oh, I didn't say it was a good organization. You said, how can an organization run by terrorists and thugs function? We have plenty of examples of that.
Through death and brutality.
Yeah.
BLM, Antifa, the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has been run by a bunch of mobsters since before I was born.
Since before most people alive today were born.
Yeah, but I'm the oldest one on this panel.
Yeah.
We got people running for office that need to be locked in jail.
I
Yeah.
will not let
yeah.
my opponent's youth and inexperience get in the way of this race.
That was a great comment, by the way.
It was a great comment. But the youthful and inexperienced ones are Josh and me. In this case.
But see, I'm the only one in this group that's old enough to have actually watched him say that.
I've seen the video.
Talking about Biden?
Reagan.
No, Reagan.
Oh, okay.
Reagan took when he was taking and running against Mondale, they were trying to say that he was too old to be president because he was in his 70s, his early 70s. And Reagan then came back and said, I will not let age become a factor in this election. I will not let my opponent's youth and inexperience become an issue.
I will not let my opponent's youth and inexperience get in the way of this race.
Oh, man.
And
The
Shut
great
it. The argument.
comebacks.
and
Just shut it down. The whole thing.
he shut the the argument ended. Bang! Oh, it was great.
We need another Reagan.
Now, yes, we do. I was actually hoping Michael Reagan would run for a while, but he chose not to do it. And we don't want Ronald Reagan Jr. anywhere near the office.
Yeah, wasn't he corrupted by all the liberals in California?
Yep. He's an atheist, a radical leftist, and a communist.
So everything that would spell doom for this country.
Mm-hmm. Everything his dad abhorred and stands against, he went for.
It's amazing how often that happens in families.
Unfortunately, yeah, it really is amazing how often that happens. Believe it or not, though, that's actually it gets the most press, but it's actually the minority, not the majority.
Oh, I didn't say it was the majority. It just happens more often than is comfortable.
Yeah. I don't have quite as big a problem with it when it happens with the young people going away from what's evil that their parents held to and come to what's right and correct. But I have a real problem when it's done the other way around.
Well, that's the whole problem with it, with free will, is it's a two-way street. People can choose to be just as good as they can choose to be evil.
Is it
But the problem is, if you close down the street in order
Well,
to
it's a
prevent the
double-edged
good
sword. It
people
cuts
from
both ways.
becoming evil, the biggest problem, in my opinion, is if you shut down the street to stop the good people from becoming evil, you also shut it down from the evil people becoming good. So you have to leave the road of free will open.
It's got to be open, and freedom of speech is required for that to be effective, and which means you have to have the freedom to offend.
Yeah.
Yeah, these people are saying, "Oh no, he hurt my feelings. I just feel so bad for myself because he said that it was wrong."
Oh, that's going to be hard to edit.
That kind of mentality. Oh, I don't care if you leave it in. But
if I do, I'm leaving my editing comment in with it.
But the mindset behind this snowflake generation that has encompassed us, and I'll state here before everybody who may or may not be watching this, I do not believe the classifications that they're using for generations. I do not believe that any one age group is going to act a specific way because they are a certain age. That is a leftist position.
Well, it's
people have free will. They're going to.
It's like I've pointed out repeatedly. Is this so-called millennials and the so-called Gen Z, they're siblings. You've got the older siblings that they're dividing against the younger siblings. So just because the younger siblings happen to be less rebellious than the older siblings, typically, they're still siblings.
I don't know. Thinking about how badly that ended in Genesis, I can see siblings acting very differently.
Yeah, but they're trying to divide the family.
There's also the situation. But yes, they are. But not all of Gen Z and millennials are Gen Y and Gen Z are actually siblings. Some are parent and kids too.
Yeah.
A generation historically is
look
looked
at our
at
brother and his
that
kid,
way,
for example.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to hit the like and subscribe buttons, maybe ring the bell, or even drop a comment below. Feed the algorithm. Feed the beast.
Send the video to random people that you may or may not like.
We don't
if
care.
You don't like what we had to say, feel free to take and leave a explanation of your position, and we'll be happy to take and have a talk with you. And thumbs down works as well.
I mean, at this point, we'd even take hate mail. At least it's something.
Yeah, that's right. Any mail's better than none.
So that being said, see you next time.